Charles here. I just wanted to redo my list of favorite Brian De Palma films because I didn't really like the way I had structured it before. I never feel good about rating a director's movies like I'm grading some sort of math test, A through F or 4 stars through 1 star, or because these are artists and really I think if we were being honest, movie viewers, critics, it's not about us, or well, it's not about grading an artist. It's about really how we feel about a film. So instead of 4 stars, I'm going instead with my top being, of course, my favorite. Of course, we all have favorite films, and if you have a favorite director, you're going to have films that are favorites of yours from your favorite director. And then the next tier is going to be the movies I love. They might not necessarily be my favorite, but I absolutely love these films from the same director. Then you have movies that you may not love, but you like. Again, it has nothing to do with stars, has nothing to do with, let's say, flaws or anything like that. I mean, you may feel like there are flaws, but this is just how this movie affects you. Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And then on the fence, man, I tell you what, there are some movies from Brian De Palma where I am truly on the fence, and we'll get to those. And then movies that are just not for me. These aren't bad movies per se. In fact, they might even be a movie or movies that everybody else loves that I don't because they're just not my cup of tea. And then there's the yikes, and that's the movies or movie that for some reason just did not just didn't work for me, but I just feel like, what were they thinking? Again, that's a little bit more opinionated, I suppose that's a little bit judgmental, but just I'm averse to that film. So once again, we'll start with Sisters. This is 1972. I would have been 1 year old at this point in time. But look, it's a solid movie. Definitely a movie I like. So we're putting it in the like section here. And we're already going to an on the fence film here. Phantom of the Paradise. Really on the fence about this one. Beautiful to look at. The colors, the style, the uniqueness, very quirky. And, if you go for rock operas, this came before the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Tommy. Kudos to Brian De Palma for even making a film like this. Just not, just something. Part of it I appreciate, part of it maybe not so much, but on the fence for sure. Obsession is a movie I absolutely love. Pretty close to a favorite of mine, so it's probably going to stay right in this position here. Great, Genevieve Bujold, Cliff Robertson, John Lithgow, sort of a romantic thriller, just a beautiful work of art right there. And another movie I love came out the exact same year. Great year for Brian De Palma. Carrie, iconic horror film. Another supernatural thriller from Brian De Palma. Right after that came The Fury, another movie I like. In fact, I like it even more than Sisters, so we're putting it right there. Now, this film right here, this is Home Movies. I have not seen it, so I'm going to have to see if I can put that well, we'll just leave it there, but we're just going to keep that right here. And then we have Dressed to Kill, which is another movie I love. I think I'm going to put it just ahead of Carrie. It's always tough. These two are almost exactly the same as far as my love for them. So, but I think just because it's so uniquely Brian De Palma, I'm putting it just slightly ahead of Carrie. And Blowout, another movie I love. Most folks would say this is his greatest film. I think it's a great film, so I'm putting it in the love category. But yeah, moving on. Scarface. I'm sorry, just not for me. I know I had an argument with a guy who, claimed he couldn't respect my list because I didn't have Scarface at the very top. But it's just, hey, look, great film, well made, just not my cup of tea. And nothing wrong with that. I totally respect people who love the film. And really anybody who loves any Brian De Palma film, I'm happy about it. So, on the other hand, the opposite, well, almost opposite, is Body Double. Such a vintage, very Brian De Palma film, his most audaciously Brian De Palma film. Love it, highly influential for me, and it's among my faves. Oh, we have a movie here called Wise Guys, which is a gangster comedy. I feel like maybe I saw it in the mid '80s, but if I did, I sure don't remember it. So I can't, in good conscience, rate it or say whether or not I liked it or didn't like it. So we'll have to leave that right where it is. But The Untouchables, I'm going to go to like. Again, I know a lot of people love it. And again, I'm glad if anybody loves any Brian De Palma film. I get the iconic nature of the film. It certainly has a lot of wonderful Brian De Palma touches. Not my favorite, and I don't really love it, and I have my reasons why, but we'll just leave it as a movie I like. So, Casualties of War. Hmm, have to do it this way. So, Casualties of War is a great, great film, a great war film. Should be mentioned along the, with the likes of Full Metal Jacket and Platoon when it comes to Vietnam War films or any war films. I have a feeling when Spielberg did Saving Private Ryan, knowing darn well that he viewed Casualties of War about 8 years before he did Saving Private Ryan. He watched Casualties of War before many people did because he had an early showing of it, being friends with Brian De Palma. I think it's clear it had a little bit of an influence when he did Saving Private Ryan because they're two of the few war films where the war part is in a flashback. So, anyway, if you haven't seen this movie, you must. It's a very, very important film. This leads us to now we really are talking about opposites because Bonfire of the Vanities is a real yikes movie for me. I'm not one of those that is influenced by others. I understand that this was panned by critics, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to pan it. But however, I really wanted to like this movie after I watched a podcast on YouTube featuring the writer who wrote The Devil's Candy. And essentially, it's a podcast about the making of Bonfire of the Vanities. And it got me so excited that I wanted to give it a third chance. And every time I watch it, it only gets worse. So it's just it's, again, perhaps I shouldn't be so judgmental. All I'll tell you is if Scarface is not my cup of tea, Bonfire of the Vanities is whatever worse than that is. Moving on to actually a film I love, which is Raising Cain, an absolute John Lithgow tour de force. Psychological thriller, vintage Brian De Palma. Not much more to say about that. And then Mission Impossible. Really like it. Really like it a lot. Boy, this is just like between Dress to Kill and Carrie. I'm not sure whether I like Untouchables more than Mission Impossible or Mission Impossible more than Untouchables. I'm going to go with it just slightly ahead of Untouchables. Yes, there are some things about Untouchables that are even better than Mission Impossible, but as a complete film, for whatever reason, I like Mission Impossible just a little bit more. Just as a complete film from start to finish. Having said that, I think there's more of a De Palma stamp on Untouchables, and normally that would put it ahead of Mission Impossible, but it's tough. Really, they could be interchangeable, to be brutally honest. Carlito's Way is easily one of my favorites, so it goes right here. I know many consider it maybe De Palma's greatest film. It's one he's certainly proud of. All the people involved are proud of it, and rightfully so. A great gangster thriller. I'm not even a big gangster fan, like gangster movie fan, clearly, since I have, Scarface so low here. But now we have Snake Eyes. Putting that right here. Another movie I love. Does it have flaws? I suppose. I don't, there's a moment that's a little bit anticlimactic. Doesn't mean the whole third act is bad. I might even go into detail about this compared to another 90s movie that everybody loves, but that's at a later date. This is that it has an original ending, a climax that's different than the one from the theatrical release. And I hope someday they have a director's cut where they put the original ending in. I know Brian De Palma regrets changing the ending now, so they might do that someday. Let me go to Mission to Mars now. Mission to Mars, oof, it's a perfect example of a movie I'm on the fence about because, man, there's a lot of stuff I love actually about Mission to Mars. Most of it, in fact. But that ending, oh my goodness. Not just because of the poor CGI, which De Palma will admit, they just ran out of money and the studio refused to give them more money to render the CGI better at the end. But I just don't really like the big reveal anyway. I like a little more subtlety with that type of reveal. So, and the ending is so important that's why I can't quite put it in like, even though it's real close. It would be right at the end of like if I did put it there. But I'm on the fence. But there's a lot of good stuff to it, so I still recommend it. Now we go to the movie I say is Brian De Palma's personal and artistic masterpiece. I actually go into detail about that in a different video. But I just say, look, it's just Brian De Palma in his prime. You could even say maybe just slightly reaching the sunset or twilight of his career here, but he's still in complete control, complete faculties of all of his skills and his artistry. And Femme Fatale is the culmination of all of that. And The Black Dahlia, believe it or not, as panned as this movie was, I love it. And I go into detail with two videos about this. So if you ever want to know why, that will tell you why. But it's it's the writer of L.A. Confidential who wrote the book The Black Dahlia. This was actually the first of his quartet of L.A. mysteries. It's a film noir. It's a tribute to film noir. And there's a lot of stuff underneath the surface. And I really appreciate it for what it is. Redacted is a very difficult film, but I'm putting it on the fence. For a while, it was a not for me film. In fact, it was down in the yikes section, but I got to appreciate it for the bravery, from Brian De Palma to make an anti-Iraq War film while the Iraq War was still going on. A lot of stuff to admire about the film, and it is very powerful. But there's a lot of things that also didn't work for me, particularly the acting um, of at least a couple of very important characters. And but anyway, it's still something to be admired. And I'm not sure if I can say I shouldn't recommend it. You know what I mean? I think maybe it should be recommended because it's one of the few powerful films about the Iraq War. If you can overlook maybe some of the acting flaws and a little bit of the screenwriting too. So trying to figure out if I should put this before. I think I'll put it just behind Phantom of the Paradise because of the uniqueness of Phantom of the Paradise. Passion, however, I am going to put. It's definitely a movie I love, so I'm going to put it maybe just slightly before Snake Eyes because it's so vintage De Palma and it's really effective. First half of Passion is sort of cold and uncomfortable, but it's supposed to be. And the second half of Passion is just straight up Brian De Palma fever dream. And it's a movie dominated by women, like a lot of De Palma films, Carrie and Femme Fatale. You could even make a case of Dress to Kill, dominated by women, and Sisters and The Fury. Very strong women in these films. So honestly, if Passion had been Brian De Palma's last film, it would be kind of appropriate. He's still, but he's still around, and hopefully someday he'll make another film because that leaves us with Domino, which is not a bad film. I can't even say it's not for me, but I am going to put it. I'm even going to put it slightly ahead of Redacted because there's some enjoyable moments in the film. Now the screenplay, the dialogue is not the best, and a lot of the acting is stiff. It's not quite bad acting per se, but it's very stiff. And so there's a couple of issues. Plus, it wasn't a very good experience for Brian De Palma, the director. He had a lot of issues with the funding, and it's a movie that he doesn't even really talk about very much. You get the sense that he almost wished he never even made it, but not because it's bad. It's just a bad experience for him, and it's not a great film. I'm not even sure. I mean, obviously, again, there I go being judgmental. This is about how I feel. It's not one of my favorites. It's not a movie I dare say I even like, but I'm on the fence. There's some things to like about it. So there we go. This is basically this exactly the same ratings or rankings, I should say, that I gave my previous post, but in this case, much more accurate because it's not about, again, not about grading him, not about rating him, the director. It's about how these movies make me feel. Do I like it? Do I love it? Do I feel ambivalent about the films? And this is a much more accurate reading. And this is 22 films that I've watched. I've watched a couple of more films that I didn't rate, but those were really early before Sisters when he was, just trying to figure out what kind of a director he would be. So that's it. And thanks for indulging me.